The crystalline chamber fell silent as Captain Marcus Chen stepped through the energy barrier, his boots echoing against the polished obsidian floor. Around him, representatives from 12 different species watched with barely concealed amusement. The Vorthak delegation clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind, while the ethereal luminari flickered with colors that clearly conveyed their skepticism. "Another human fool," whispered Ambassador Zextai, her reptilian, features twisted in disdain. "Do they truly believe one of their primitive kind can claim the Star Throne?" The throne itself dominated the chamber's center, a magnificent construct of what appeared to be living metal and starlight, pulsing with energies that had confounded the galaxy's greatest scientists for millennia. Carved from a single piece of neutronium and infused with technologies beyond current understanding, it had remained dormant for over 10,000 years. Hundreds had tried to activate it. All had failed. Marcus ignored the whispers and approached the ancient seat of power. He'd studied the historical records, reviewed every attempt, analyzed every failure. The pattern was always the same. Beings of immense psychic ability, technological prowess, or physical perfection would approach with grand ceremonies and elaborate preparations, only to find the throne as cold and lifeless as space itself. "The human doesn't even possess basic telepathic abilities," scoffed High Counselor Veltar of the Cerebral Collective, his oversized brain pulsing with condescension. "How does he expect to interface with technology that requires a neural link? Coefficient of at least 9.7? Humans barely register 0.3 on our scales." The Galactic Council had reluctantly agreed to humanity's request for a trial, more out of diplomatic necessity than any real belief in success. Humans were still the newest, members of the interstellar community, barely a century since first contact. They were seen as useful for their industrial capacity and surprising military effectiveness, but hardly candidates for wielding the universe's most powerful artifact. Marcus reached the throne and paused, his hand hovering inches from its surface. The metal seemed to shimmer as if anticipating his touch. The assembled delegates leaned forward despite themselves, curious to witness another failure. "This is unprecedented," muttered Dr. Keth Moran, the galaxy's leading expert on ancient technologies. He's showing no fear response. Typically, beings with sufficient neural complexity to even attempt activation display heightened stress indicators when approaching the throne. What they didn't understand, what no species in the galaxy had grasped, was that the Star Throne wasn't looking for perfection. It wasn't seeking the most advanced mind or the strongest psychic signature. For 10 millennia, it had waited for something else entirely. Potential. Marcus sat down. The reaction was immediate and violent. Light erupted from every surface of the throne, bathing the chamber in radiance that forced even the photosynthetic heliarchs to shield their optical sensors. Energy cascaded through crystalline conduits that hadn't glowed since the predecessor civilization vanished into legend. But more than light filled the chamber. Information flooded through the neural link that formed instantly between Marcus and the throne, not the gradual, carefully modulated connection that other species had expected, but a torrential download of pure knowledge, star charts showing the locations of ancient predecessor vaults, technical specifications for technologies that could reshape matter at the quantum level, the true history of the galaxy's rise and fall, and rise again. The assembled delegates staggered back, their various sensory organs overwhelmed by the display. Several of the more psychically sensitive species collapsed entirely, their minds unable to process the sheer volume of data flowing through the chamber. "Impossible," breathed Ambassador Zextai, her earlier mockery replaced by genuine awe. "The neural feedback alone should have liquefied his brain matter." Marcus remained perfectly still in the throne, his human features calm even as information that had driven predecessor scholars mad coursed through his consciousness. His eyes had taken on the same star-like quality as the throne itself, but his expression remained utterly serene. Dr. Kethmaran frantically operated his scanning equipment, his multiple arms working in perfect coordination. I'm reading neural activity patterns I've never encountered. His brain isn't being overwhelmed. It's adapting. Somehow his neural pathways are restructuring themselves in real time to accommodate the data flow. High Counselor Veltar's massive brain pulsed with confusion and growing fear. This violates every principle of cognitive science. The human mind is too simple, too limited. It shouldn't be capable of this level of neural plasticity. That was their mistake, assuming that complexity and advancement meant superiority. The galaxy's elder species had evolved elaborate mental architectures, rigid and perfect, but inflexible. Their minds were like precisely engineered machines, powerful but unable to adapt beyond their designed parameters. Humanity was different. Younger, wilder, shaped by a chaotic world that demanded constant adaptation. Human brains weren't the most powerful in the galaxy, but they were perhaps the most adaptable. Where other species saw the throne's demands as impossible challenges, Marcus's mind simply reshaped itself to meet them. The light began to fade, but the throne continued to pulse with newfound life. Marcus's eyes slowly returned to normal, though they retained flecks of starlight that hadn't been there before. He rose from the seat with fluid grace, as if he'd been sitting there his entire life. "The predecessor archives are now accessible," he said simply, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the chamber's crystalline structure. "The galaxy's reconstruction can begin." The silence stretched for long moments before Ambassador Zextai found her voice. What are you?" Marcus smiled, and for just an instant, the assembled delegates glimpsed something vast and patient behind his human features. Not alien, but evolved, transformed by contact with technologies beyond current understanding. "I'm still human," he said, "just more than I was." The Star Throne pulsed once more behind him, acknowledging its new partner in the great work ahead.